Around 8 p.m. on Wednesday, Patrick Dunn arrived home after staying an extra hour and a half at work. He had been working on a wiring job that his supervisor, Wayne Falk, had assigned earlier that day. Patrick's dedication and hard work allowed him to finish the task almost half a day ahead of schedule. Despite his sore muscles from working tirelessly all day, he felt a sense of accomplishment. His wife, Glenda, had left for a 3-day seminar in Columbus that morning, giving him the chance to focus on work. Although he had originally planned to go with her, they had a cruise booked for spring break, and the tickets were prominently displayed in their china cabinet. Surprised by the absence of a message confirming her safe arrival, Patrick decided to call Glenda. He dialed her cell phone from their home phone, and she answered after just 2 rings, sounding delighted to hear from him. She mentioned that she had been about to call him. Patrick wasn't surprised she knew it was him calling, as their home phone displayed his number. "You know, I've always had a knack for reading your mind, honey," Patrick said with a chuckle. "So, I'm assuming you made it there safely. How was the traffic? Hope your car is still in one piece." He laughed, imagining her rolling her eyes and sticking her tongue out if they were face to face. The possibility of snowfall in early January worried him a bit. If she had driven, he would be anxious, but if she had flown, he would feel relieved. She quickly reassured him, laughing and telling him that everything was fine. Traffic had been light, and she had easily found the Sharon Hotel with the help of the map he had printed for her. "You know I'll do anything for you, darling. Nothing's too good for my Glenda," he said. He had asked for the day off to join her, but she firmly declined. "No, you're not coming," she said, explaining that she wanted to wait until spring break for a trip together. "Yeah, I know. Just teasing, Glenda," he responded, though her firm rejection bothered him. "I'll be a good boy and stay home," he said, laughing. He noticed the relief in her voice as she said, "Glad to hear it, Patrick. It'll be a boring few days with seminars lined up. We wouldn't have time together anyway. You think I'm reading your mind, Glenda? Need to talk? Oh, you reminded me. I can't find my travel bag with the sewing kit and stuff. Maybe it's in the bedroom or car trunk." "Sure thing, babe. Hold on. Let me grab the cordless," he said, dashing upstairs and spotting the bag on the dresser. "Found it," he said into the phone. "Careful with the buttons and lint," she sighed in relief, mentioning a nearby store for replacements. "Gotta go. Registration's open. Busy week ahead with presentations and dinners, but we'll have Saturday evening together."
Norge Åris, hun.
"Worked extra today, so I should make it Thursday and Friday. Call me if you can. I'll do the same if anything comes up. See you Saturday for dinner." After exchanging pleasantries, Patrick headed downstairs, reflecting on Glenda's recent behavior. Despite her rejection of his joke about joining her trip, she'd been acting oddly for months. Hungry and distracted, he ordered pizza. With almost 40 minutes until delivery, he changed out of his work uniform and relaxed with a beer at the kitchen table. Overweightness wasn't a concern thanks to his active job. Since Glenda wasn't a pizza fan, he indulged himself. Leftovers would be lunch tomorrow, easily reheated at work. He spent an hour watching a news program on TV, but found himself drifting back to thoughts of Glenda and her recent change in behavior. It troubled him that she objected strongly to him joining her on her trip. Glenda, 35, was tall, slender, with long dark hair and eyes. She worked as a sociology professor and was proud of her success as a junior faculty member. She mentioned having more classes than others, but had a teaching assistant to help with grading and advising tasks. When the fall semester began, she talked about her TA, Anthony, a graduating senior who took on some of her responsibilities. His name came up occasionally, but not lately. In mid-November, she discussed upcoming seminars during the New Year break, initially agreeing to Patrick joining her, but then she changed her mind. However, after 2 weeks, she changed her mind, preferring to take a trip during spring break instead. Reluctantly, Patrick accepted her decision. During Christmas, the seminars weren't a topic of discussion as they enjoyed the holiday with family and friends. Glenda received envelopes with training materials and quickly sent back her registration. Eager to travel, she began packing days before New Year's Eve, her organized nature shining through. Returning to the bedroom after 8 o'clock, Patrick planned to resume reading a book he had left on the bedside table. Seeing Glenda's bag, He moved it to its usual spot in the closet. As he did, he noticed it was resting on top of her journal. Married for 8 years, he had rarely glimpsed her diary, which she kept hidden away. He had once jokingly asked to read it, but she firmly refused, deeming it personal and private. They never discussed it again, and in their 8 years together, he had only seen it a couple of times before she quickly locked it away. Patrick suspected Glinda wrote her journal entries either in her college office or at home while he was at work. Their schedules didn't align. She was usually home when he left and back by the time he finished. Returning the bag to the closet, he picked up the journal for the first time in a while. The 6 by 8-inch book, an inch thick, was bound in red leather and secured with a latch and brass lock. Patrick realized the journal might hold clues to Glinda's recent behavior. Instead of returning it to the dresser, he took it downstairs to the brighter kitchen. Examining it closely, he noticed only a third of the pages showed signs of use, suggesting it couldn't be her only diary for 8 years' worth of entries. There must be older volumes elsewhere. After a brief moment of pondering, Patrick realized Glinda's closet was the likely place for her earlier diaries. They each had their own closet, and he had never explored hers. Heading upstairs, he searched for 5 minutes before finding a shoebox on the top shelf containing a stack of red leather diaries. He returned to the kitchen with his find. Notably, each diary had a small white sticker on the spine and was numbered 1 through 6, while the current one was unnumbered. Embossed on the back cover of each was the name Comes, a local specialty store. All 7 locks were identical, lacking any distinguishing marks. Patrick wondered if they all used the same key. Curious, he grabbed the phone book and quickly found Comes Specialty's number. With it nearing 8:35, he wondered if they'd be open, considering many downtown stores stayed open late on Wednesdays. After 2 rings, a young woman answered, "Comes Specialties. How can I assist you?" Her tone sounded genuine. Patrick inquired about red leather diaries, approximately 6 by 8 inches, as a gift. "I think I know the book you mean. Let me check," she said, pausing for about 3 minutes. Upon her return, she confirmed they had 2 in stock and assured him the store was open until 10 p.m. Patrick hurried there, hoping to obtain a diary and possibly the key to unlock them. The odds were slim, but Patrick knew attempting to open the lock would likely damage them and earn Glinda's lasting reproach. Within half an hour, he was heading home with a red leather diary and key in his bag. Despite its $60 price tag, he saw it as a small price to uncover his wife's worries. He considered giving the new diary as her birthday gift, envisioning her concealing an illness as she had with an abnormal pap test result before. He also speculated about workplace conflicts among college faculty, aware Glinda preferred to handle such matters independently. Another possibility lingered in his mind, one he struggled to push aside: the idea of Glinda having an affair. Reluctant to entertain such thoughts, he focused on other potential explanations. Despite their physical differences, he was shorter with blonde hair and blue eyes. While she was tall and slender, they had known each other since high school, even dating briefly after high school. Their paths diverged with Patrick becoming an electrician apprentice and Glinda pursuing higher education. They reunited in college and quickly married after her graduation. With Patrick established as a master electrician and their home purchased, they planned for a larger house and discussed starting a family, deciding that Glinda would stop taking birth control pills by the end of the school year. Back home, Patrick wasn't entirely confident the new journal's key would fit. He found it in a small envelope in the diary box, appearing too small. He realized he should have asked the salesman about the key's compatibility. If it didn't fit, he'd abandon the attempt rather than search for Glinda's hidden keys. 5 minutes later, he sat at the kitchen table with a stack of diaries, contemplating whether to use the key on Glinda's latest journal. Concern for her health and persistent curiosity urged him on. He hesitated, fearing he might betray her trust. Eventually, he picked the lock. The key fit perfectly. As he flipped through the pages, he found Glinda's recent entries dated the previous day, filling most of the page. He quickly perused the neat handwriting on the page, his expression draining of color as tears welled in his eyes. Moving to the kitchen sink, he absent-mindedly squeezed his soda can, causing it to overflow onto his arm. Eventually noticing the mess, he cleaned himself up and moved to the living room, placing the diaries on the end table. Turning on the lamp, He settled into his chair with the 7th journal, eager to uncover the truth behind his shattered perception of his wife and their life together. Instead of reading in reverse, he opted for chronological order, hoping for answers. Tempted to confront her at the hotel, he dismissed the idea, fearing a losing battle or emotional breakdown. The first page, dated early June, marked the beginning of Patrick's search for clues within Glenda's diary. Despite finding contentment in her life, career, and marriage, none of the summer entries shed light on the shocking revelation from the last page. By early September, however, he found a crucial entry that hinted at the answers he sought, prompting him to read it twice. On September 8th, Glenda wrote about meeting her new teaching assistant, Anthony Romano, describing him as slightly taller, with black hair, dark eyes, and a short beard. She noted his impressive qualifications. Patrick searched the diary for further mentions of Anthony, but found nothing in the subsequent entries. Glenda seemed content, but slightly anxious about handling a large class with over 100 students. On September 15th, Glenda wrote about Anthony assisting her in her large class, answering students' questions while she prepared lecture materials. She observed that her female students seemed fond of him, comparing him to Leonardo DiCaprio. As Patrick read further, mentions of Anthony Romano became more frequent, prompting him to scrutinize the passages more closely. On September 20th, Glenda noted that classes were proceeding as usual, with a few students dropping out due to difficulty. She observed Anthony watching her during lectures from the front row and planned to assign him more work. On September 24th, Glenda mentioned working on a reading assignment when Anthony visited her office, helping with the task efficiently. She also expressed her intention to discuss future plans regarding children with Patrick, marking the first mention of this topic. By September 30th, Glenda noticed Anthony's persistent attention during lectures, despite her disapproving glance. Female students approached him for questions, showing more interest in him than in her. Despite this, Glenda felt pleased with her students' progress and the pressure she felt as a full professor. While subsequent entries omitted mentions of Anthony, Glenda remained optimistic about her classes and expressed her desire to discuss family plans with Patrick after her first year as a full professor, planning to start trying to conceive at the end of the school year. On October 8th, Glenda excitedly shared with Anthony her decision to start a family with Patrick after the spring semester. His supportive reaction led to an unexpected hug in her office, though she gently reminded him of their surroundings. On October 10th, Glenda felt uneasy when Anthony locked her office door during a visit, but he complied when she requested him to unlock it. His brief stay left her questioning his intentions. On October 11th, Anthony returned to assist Glenda, expressing a preference for mature women and apologizing for locking the door the day before. Though happily married, Glenda found his attention flattering, entertaining thoughts about his interest in her over younger women at the college. On October 13th, Glenda anticipated Anthony's visit to her office but felt disappointed when he didn't show up, wanting to discuss his interest in mature women further. On October 15th, despite hoping Anthony would stay after the students left her office, he left before she could engage in further conversation. On October 16th, Glenda finally spoke to Anthony, who expressed a preference for mature women based on his past experiences. She failed to assert her boundaries and regretted not condemning his behavior, now haunted by the encounter. Patrick found this entry troubling, realizing Glenda didn't react as he expected. He left the diary open and fetched a new can of soda before returning to read more about the situation with Anthony. On October 20th, just before leaving work, Anthony unexpectedly entered Glenda's office, disregarding her request to leave the door open. He confessed he had been thinking about her constantly and requested a longer kiss, claiming it was for his birthday. Feeling uneasy, Glenda agreed to get rid of him. Later, she realized his birthday was in July, feeling tricked but laughing it off. She worried about his intentions and resolved to be cautious around him. In the following entry, Anthony is absent as Glenda focuses on grading tests and essays. Patrick finds it strange that Anthony didn't participate, but the journal offers no explanation. On October 30th, Glenda wrote about an incident that was difficult for her to put into words. Anthony had come into her office, locking the door behind him, and pulled her towards him without giving her a chance to protest. She felt ashamed for not stopping him sooner. When she finally pushed him away, he insisted she enjoyed it. She asked him to leave, but he just smirked and said he'd see her tomorrow. She wrote about feeling trapped and unsure whether to confide in Patrick, struggling to handle the situation with Anthony. Worse, she couldn't shake thoughts of Anthony from her mind. Patrick, reading the entry repeatedly, realized he was filled with anger he didn't know he had. On November 2nd, Glenda wrote about finally stopping worrying about Patrick noticing anything unusual. The first night was tough, but he didn't suspect a thing despite her anxiety. It made her realize how easy it was to keep secrets from him. On November 6th, Glenda wrote that it had been days since she was alone with Anthony. Even when he was in class, he still stared at her, making her feel uneasy. November 8th, Anthony visited my office today, but others were present. He kissed me quickly before leaving, making me uncomfortable. Despite that, I'm considering attending a seminar series in Columbus after the new year. November 9th. Yesterday was another challenging day to recount. Anthony's behavior continues to trouble me, and I'm starting to worry about how it will all unfold if I don't address it soon. Despite my efforts to focus on work, Anthony managed to enter my office unnoticed. When he attempted to kiss me, I hesitated before giving in momentarily. Regaining control, I pushed him away and retreated to the bathroom, overwhelmed with guilt and fear of Patrick's reaction if he ever found out. Anthony, unapologetic, left after expressing a desire for a repeat. Although upset, I managed to compose myself before Patrick arrived home, masking my distress as we conversed throughout the evening. Patrick, seething with anger, repeatedly reviewed the day's entry, focusing on the Anthony incident. Despite this, he observed a notable absence of mentions regarding Anthony or their relationship in Glenda's diary for the following week, which somewhat relieved him. November 17th. I'm grappling with a confusing situation. Anthony's influence over me is stronger than I anticipated. I can't decipher if it's his demeanor or my own vulnerability, but I feel powerless around him. This afternoon, I confronted him about our previous encounter, emphasizing the inappropriateness of our connection given my marital status and professional position. Despite my assertiveness, he exhibited unsettling behavior, suggesting we lock the office door and inviting me to join him on the couch. I can't explain why I agreed. We've crossed a dangerous line, and I'm torn between wanting to dismiss him from his role and justifying our actions. I can never confess to Patrick, and I'm relieved our indiscretions remain concealed, shielded by the privacy of my office. I hope to regain my composure before returning home. Patrick, troubled by the escalating situation, resolved to thoroughly read Glenda's diaries to better understand her. He revisited 2 pages once more, then glanced up to find it was already 2 a.m. Despite knowing there were numerous pages left, he couldn't set the book down. He left a message at work indicating he'd be unavailable the next day due to personal matters. His life had irrevocably changed, leaving behind love and aspirations replaced by a profound emptiness and mounting rage. Downing the last soda in the bathroom, he returned to his journal in the living room. Unaffected by caffeine, his mind raced, grappling with the weight of what he'd read. Glancing at his watch, he marveled at how just 8 hours ago he had conversed with Glenda, his suspicions yet to surface. November 22 ND. Anthony stopped by the office today, but I maintained distance, keeping the desk between us. His behavior was appropriate. He didn't intrude or attempt to lock the door. My guilt prevented any further involvement with him. I sensed his recognition of my resolve to maintain boundaries, hoping to uphold it in the coming days. Glenda's mood was upbeat as the semester neared its end. November 23 RD. I informed Patrick about the seminars, and he's supportive, even offering to accompany me. I'll consider his proposal. As it seems, their dynamic shifted significantly from November 23 to mid-December. November 25 Anthony visited the office, expressing a desire to visit my home. Firmly declining, I emphasized that it wasn't an option. He inquired about Patrick's whereabouts, suggesting a visit to his residence. Rebuffing the idea, I reiterated my stance. Despite his persistence, he remained relatively usual in his behavior, expressing interest in the seminars despite their faculty-only status. November 30. Yesterday weighed heavily on me, a day I struggled to recount. I feel utterly lost. Sleep evaded me, and Patrick sensed my distress. I wish I could confide in him, but the words elude me. Anthony haunts my dreams. Though I harbor no affection for him, I'm tormented by memories of our encounters, questioning my inability to resist. I stood by as he locked the door, unable to protest. Throughout, my mind screamed for me to stop. After he left, tears streamed down my face as I dressed, consumed by regret. I spent the day locked in my office, grappling with my thoughts, considering therapy. Despite Glenda's evident remorse, Patrick couldn't fathom her actions, which deviated from her usual character. As he delved deeper into her journal, his disposition grew darker, unsettling those who knew him well. December 3rd. Anthony intercepted me in the hallway this morning, urging me to reconsider meeting him at his shared house. He desired closeness in a real bed, but I firmly refused, emphasizing the risk to my marriage and career. Undeterred, he proposed accompanying me to the January seminars, even offering to cover his expenses if I spent nights with him. I rejected his advances, but his suggestion lingered in my mind. I questioned my own weakness. Patrick, seething with anger, took a break to calm himself. He resisted the urge to drink, opting for clarity instead. Though he was certain of his next steps, he knew he needed a solid plan. Returning to the living room, he resumed reading his journal. December 17th. Anthony briefly visited my office to bid farewell before his Christmas trip home after his exam tomorrow. He inquired about returning early for the seminar, suggesting we could spend time together without interruptions. I didn't respond to his proposal, feeling uneasy about the implications. Patrick's supportive offer to accompany me to the seminars feels like a lifeline, but I haven't decided yet. I need to distance myself from Anthony, yet the thought of being away from Patrick during this time also scares me. The conflict inside me grows, and I'm losing sleep over it. December 10th. The semester is ending, and I'm looking forward to a break. I need time to clear my head and regain my focus. Anthony's absence these past few days has given me a little peace, but his last visit still lingers in my mind. I've been trying to reconnect with Patrick, cherishing the moments we share at home. His support and love are the only things keeping me grounded right now. December 15th. Today was the last day of classes before the holiday break. Patrick and I had a long conversation over dinner about our plans for the future, and it felt good to talk openly about our hopes and dreams. We discussed starting a family again, and it brought a sense of normalcy back into my life. I haven't seen or heard from Anthony since his last visit, and I'm hoping the distance will help me regain control. December 18th. Anthony called my office today, catching me off guard. He wanted to wish me happy holidays and reminded me about his earlier proposal to join me at the seminars. I kept the conversation brief, wishing him well and reiterating that I plan to attend the seminars alone. He didn't push further, but the conversation left me feeling uneasy. I need to find a way to make this stop. December 22nd. Patrick and I are preparing for Christmas. The festive spirit around the house has been a welcome distraction from my worries. We're hosting family and friends, and it's been wonderful to see everyone. I've decided to accept Patrick's offer to come with me to the seminars. I haven't told him everything, but having him by my side feels like the best decision for now. December 25th. Christmas was beautiful. Surrounded by loved ones, I managed to forget my troubles for a while. Patrick and I had a quiet moment together after everyone left, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for having him in my life. I've resolved to be more open with him in the coming year, to rebuild the trust and intimacy that we've lost. December 29th. As the year draws to a close, I find myself reflecting on everything that's happened. Patrick and I are planning our trip to Columbus, and I'm hopeful that the change of scenery will help us reconnect. Anthony hasn't contacted me again, and I'm determined to keep it that way. The seminars will be a fresh start for us, a chance to leave behind the past few months and focus on our future. Patrick, sitting back with the journal in his hands, felt a mixture of relief and lingering anger. Glenda's recent entries suggested she was trying to put distance between herself and Anthony, and her decision to have him accompany her to the seminars was a reassuring sign. Yet, the betrayal and the secrecy still stung deeply. He knew they had a long road ahead to rebuild their relationship, but he was willing to try. With a heavy heart, he decided it was time to confront Glinda, to lay everything bare and begin the painful process of healing together. Samuel's curiosity was piqued, but he refrained from pressing further. "All right, Patrick. Thanks again for the generous gift for the kids. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call," Samuel said, walking Patrick to the door. As he drove away, Patrick's mind swirled with the memories and plans of the day ahead. He couldn't help but think about the stark difference between his life and Samuel's, filled with warmth, family, and apparent normalcy. The contrast made his own turmoil feel even more acute. Returning home, Patrick was resolute in his next steps. By noon, he had reviewed his legal documents and financial arrangements. He spent the afternoon meticulously organizing his findings and thoughts, ready to confront Glinda with irrefutable evidence and a plan. Patrick's hand trembled slightly as he dialed Glinda's number. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice cheerful and unaware of the storm brewing.
Patrick.
"How's your day going?" she asked. "We need to talk, Glinda. Can you come home early today?" Patrick's voice was steady, betraying none of the tumult inside. There was a pause on the other end. "Sure. Is everything all right?" "We'll talk when you get here," he replied curtly, ending the call before she could probe further. The hours until Glinda's return seemed to stretch endlessly. Patrick occupied himself by rereading parts of her diaries, trying to understand her mindset, while also drafting a list of questions and points he needed to address. When Glinda walked through the door, she found Patrick sitting at the kitchen table, the brown envelope and the printed photos placed neatly before him. The sight of them caused her to freeze in the doorway, her face a mask of confusion and dawning dread. "Patrick, what's going on?" she asked, her voice quivering slightly. "Sit down, Glinda. We need to have a serious conversation," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. She obeyed, her eyes darting nervously between Patrick and the envelope. Patrick took a deep breath, feeling a surge of both anger and sorrow. "I know about Anthony," he began, his voice calm but cold. He pushed the envelope towards her. "Open it." With trembling hands, Glinda opened the envelope and pulled out the photos. Her eyes widened, and she let out a small gasp, tears welling up almost immediately. "Patrick, I can explain," she started, but he cut her off. "I've read your diaries, Glinda. All of them. I've seen the photos, and I have video evidence. There's nothing you can say to explain away what you did." Patrick's voice cracked, the hurt and betrayal evident. Glinda broke down in tears, her hands covering her face. "I'm so sorry, Patrick. I never meant for any of this to happen." Patrick felt a pang of pity but steeled himself. "Why, Glinda? Why did you do it?" he demanded. She took a moment to compose herself, wiping away tears. "I don't know, Patrick. I was weak, and Anthony took advantage of that. I was flattered by his attention, and I made terrible, terrible choices. I never wanted to hurt you." Her confession brought a brief silence, heavy with the weight of the situation. Patrick finally spoke, his voice softer but still firm. "I loved you, Glinda. I trusted you. How are we supposed to move past this?" Glinda shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't know. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, but I understand if you can't forgive me." Patrick looked at her, the woman he thought he knew, and felt a mixture of sorrow, anger, and a flicker of the love he once held. "I need time to think, Glinda. I can't make any decisions right now. I need space." Glinda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Take all the time you need, Patrick. I'm so sorry." Patrick stood up, feeling the exhaustion of the past days weighing heavily on him. "I'm going out for a while. We'll talk more when I get back." Without waiting for her response, he grabbed his coat and keys, leaving Glinda sobbing at the kitchen table. As he drove away, Patrick felt a semblance of relief. The confrontation was just the beginning, but at least now, everything was out in the open. He had a long road ahead, filled with difficult decisions and potential heartbreak, but for the first time in days, he felt a small sense of control over his life. "I can help." "Is Patrick in trouble?" Glinda asked, her voice tinged with concern. Detective Rankin gave her a reassuring nod but remained serious. "We're here to discuss a few matters with him, nothing to worry about. Would it be all right if we waited inside?" Glinda hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Of course, please come in. She led them to the living room, offering them seats. Can I get you anything to drink?
Caffè, tè.
No, thank you, Officer Reynolds replied politely. We're fine. Glinda sat across from them, trying to remain calm. What's this about, if you don't mind me asking? Detective Rankin glanced at Officer Reynolds before speaking. We have some questions regarding recent activities and interactions that may involve Patrick. It's routine, but we need his perspective to clear up a few things. Glinda's mind raced, wondering what could have brought the police to their door. She thought of Anthony but dismissed the idea, thinking it too far-fetched. I see. Well, Patrick should be home soon. You're welcome to wait. As they settled in, Glinda excused herself to the kitchen, her thoughts a jumble of worry and confusion. She tried calling Patrick again, hoping to give him a heads-up, but there was no answer. She left a voicemail, urging him to come home as soon as possible and mentioning the police were waiting. After about half an hour, the sound of the front door opening caught everyone's attention. Patrick entered, looking exhausted but alert. He stopped short, seeing the two officers in his living room. Patrick Dunn? Detective Rankin stood, extending his hand. Yes, that's me, Patrick replied, shaking the detective's hand. What's going on? Mr. Dunn, we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding your recent activities and interactions. It's part of an ongoing investigation, the detective said, maintaining a professional tone. Patrick glanced at Glinda, who was now standing in the kitchen doorway, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. All right, what do you need to know? Detective Rankin gestured for him to sit. We've been following up on reports of certain suspicious activities and need your account of events over the past few weeks. Specifically, we're interested in your interactions with a Mr. Anthony Collins. Patrick's face hardened at the mention of Anthony's name. What about him? We understand you may have had some confrontations with him, Officer Reynolds interjected. Anything you can tell us about your dealings with Mr. Collins would be helpful. Patrick sighed, rubbing his temples. Anthony Collins. He was involved with my wife, he began, shooting a glance at Glinda. I found out about their affair recently. It's been a difficult time for both of us. Detective Rankin nodded. We're aware of that aspect, Mr. Dunn. However, we're more interested in any direct interactions you might have had with him, particularly any that may have led to physical confrontations or threats. Patrick frowned, thinking back to his encounters with Anthony. There was one time, a week ago, I confronted him at his place. I told him to stay away from Glinda. He didn't take it well, but it didn't get physical. We just exchanged some harsh words. Detective Rankin took notes, then looked up. Was there any indication that Mr. Collins might have harbored ill intentions towards you or your wife? Patrick shook his head. No, he seemed more interested in causing emotional harm than anything else. He enjoyed the power he had over Glinda. I doubt he'd risk physical violence. The detective nodded, exchanging a glance with Officer Reynolds. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Dunn. We'll be in touch if we need further information. In the meantime, if anything comes up or you think of anything else, please give us a call. Patrick walked them to the door, watching as they drove away. When he returned to the living room, Glinda was standing there, looking worried. Patrick, what was that all about? He sighed, pulling her into a hug. It's nothing we can't handle. They're just being thorough. We'll get through this, Glinda. As they stood there, holding each other, Patrick felt a strange sense of calm. The storm wasn't over, but they had faced the worst of it together. Whatever came next, they would tackle it as a team. The future was uncertain, but at least now they were confronting it with honesty and a renewed sense of purpose. Glinda's heart raced as she stared at the photos, her mind reeling with disbelief and fear. She reached for the copies, her hands trembling slightly, and studied them intently. The images were clear enough to make out the faces of herself and Anthony, captured in moments of intimacy that she had thought were private. I don't understand, Glinda stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. How did these photos end up there? Detective Rankin leaned forward, his gaze steady. That's what we're trying to determine, Mrs. Dunn. Your husband's connection to Anthony Romano in the presence of these photos at the crime scene raised some troubling questions. Glinda felt a surge of panic rising within her. She had never imagined that her past relationship with Anthony could lead to such a nightmare. But Patrick had nothing to do with this, she insisted, desperation creeping into her tone. He would never hurt anyone, let alone do something like this. The detective regarded her with a skeptical expression. We'll need to speak with your husband to get his side of the story. In the meantime, I would advise you to cooperate fully with our investigation. Glinda nodded, her mind racing with thoughts of how to protect Patrick. She couldn't shake the feeling of dread that was settling over her like a dark cloud. As the reality of the situation sank in, she realized that their lives would never be the same again. Glinda's world crumbled around her as she processed the information provided by the detective. The evidence against Patrick seemed damning, yet she couldn't bring herself to believe that he was capable of such violence. Clutching the photocopy of the key, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. As the detective and officer waited for Glinda to compose herself, she felt a wave of despair wash over her. The reality of Patrick's disappearance and the implications of his involvement in Anthony's death weighed heavily on her conscience. She couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and betrayal, wondering how she could have been so blind to the truth. When Glinda's sister arrived to offer support, the detectives departed, leaving Glinda to grapple with her emotions alone. As she sat in silence, the weight of the situation bore down on her, and she couldn't help but question every decision she had made leading up to this moment. Meanwhile, the detectives discussed the case as they made their way to their cars. Officer Reynolds pondered over Glinda's story about Patrick's cell phone, feeling a sense of unease about the situation. Detective Rankin, however, had a different perspective. He couldn't shake the suspicion that Patrick's return to retrieve his phone might have been a pretext for something more sinister. As they parted ways, both men were left with lingering questions about the true nature of Patrick's disappearance and the events that had led to it. And as the investigation unfolded, they could only hope to uncover the truth